This is your regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen's meeting. It is being audio and video recorded. It will be replayed on Channel 9. It will be live on Channel 9 and also played on YouTube in perpetuity. I do call this meeting back to order. And at this time, I ask that everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to mention the passing of 3 individuals. Not all residents of Dayton, but connected to Dayton. Alan Rebowen was a teacher at Dayton Rehoboth for many years, well and over 30 years. He taught math. I remember when he was hired. The second person is Edmund Milo, CPA. Ed actually was a resident of Dayton for a number of years, and his 2 daughters went to Dayton Rehoboth. And Veronica McGuire grew up in Dayton, and her parents still live in town. And in their memory, I would ask for a moment of silence, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And our condolences to their family and friends as well. Okay, at this time, we have an appointment with the Board of Health, forgive us for being 5 minutes late tonight, to discuss the educational incentive for the health agent. I want to thank you for coming. I think the board had a couple questions about different things. We do have all the information that you had sent over, including the vote. So, Mr. Chairman, Tom Pyers, was there anything you wanted to open up with about this?
Not particularly. I just was a little curious why you would want to see us for the educational portion here when we previously were following union contracts, but via the personnel bylaw. I since understand that's expired, but I would suggest that, as with any type of other employee contract, until there's a new one put in place, that one continues to be in force. And if this is a new procedure or policy, that's fine, but it's just, I'm not comfortable with where it's beginning, which is with our health agent. I'm just a little curious of, I won't say he's been singled out, because there are a few other people that fall into the same situation. But historically, that's been the practice of the town. And, you know, we're curious why it's being challenged.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say it's being challenged. I did have a question of what the ask is. Is the ask, for example, and I should start by saying we appreciate everything you do, and you do an excellent job. That's without question. I had an ask of, is the request for it to be retroeffective back to when Mr. Pilling started? That was one of my questions, and I had asked the town administrator, and she wasn't clear on the request, which is why we had asked you.
Well, we didn't budget for it, and I probably believe at the time, I didn't know he had one, and he didn't know he was entitled to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't get budgeted, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were to go a full year retro, I'm not sure we have enough funds in the 50 line personnel to fund it. I'd have to figure that out. I don't know if, certainly wouldn't balk at the idea of going
Of
back
course.
to retro.
It was more like I didn't want to read anyone's mind by making a decision, and then turns out the request was for it to be since he was hired.
We didn't even talk about retro, just going forward.
Well, I didn't bring it up in that case.
What was your start date? When did you actually start?
September 11th, 2017.
Okay, forget that, because that makes it an old bill.
I know it said December 4th of 2017, I went to 20 hours. And then in February, I went to 25 hours. So,
Okay,
but I wasn't necessarily looking for retro, I just
The-
moved forward.
the furthest you could go back is July 1st of the current fiscal year, because anything prior to that's an old bill. How much money are we talking about?
That was my other question.
800 is the
Bachelor's?
dollar amount for bachelor's.
Okay, you put postgraduate, you mean bachelor's. It's not postgraduate, it's
Yes.
this letter said postgraduate, it's a bachelor's, so it's not, it's,
Is that what the school put?
No.
no.
It's a
It's a
bachelor's. It's a
bachelor's.
bachelor's.
It's your letter that says
I didn't
postgraduate.
realize it was written that way.
I don't object to it. I don't object to it going back to the 1st of July. I think that if the board votes it, you need to talk to Jen to see how much money's available, and we may be looking at a year-end transfer as we get closer to the end of this fiscal year. To me, it's an issue of fairness. Everybody gets recognition for their degrees that I'm aware of, except for the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator.
I have an associate's also.
All right, we forget you.
But you raised a good concern.
No, I'm talking
because
about,
I'm just saying there are other people in the building who will be coming to the board to also ask for it as well. And I have no problem voting on this tonight, because we do the educational incentive, but I just want everyone to be aware that we will not have a case to single anybody out, as Mr.
no,
Pires said.
and I think the thing is, if it wasn't a requirement of the job, but the person we select to do the job has that degree, I think it's a plus. I can speak personally working with Todd on the Stormwater Committee. That degree that he has, somebody might look at it and say, well, what's that got to do with being a health agent? He's got a degree, a bachelor's in civil engineering. I can tell you that the field work he has to do, along with other members of the Stormwater Committee, when they do site visits and when there's discussion about a lot of the things that come under the Stormwater Committee now, his education and background have been invaluable. No, they weren't. I mean, we didn't have a Stormwater Committee way back then, but I can tell you in working with him, his background, his education is very valuable to the committee that I chair, so.
And your work speaks for
Support it.
itself, Mr. Pillen.
Can I
Sure,
just
Selectman
ask the
Christie.
question then? So it wasn't a requirement that he have a bachelor's degree for that position? Because I don't want to start,
Bachelor's preferred.
it was not a requirement, though.
Yeah.
Well, my concern is that we're going to be posting different positions, and we're asking for a bachelor's degree, and then we hire somebody with a bachelor's degree, and then they're asking for additional monies. That would be my concern. So I do believe in the job description now, though. It does, I think it says more than preferred. I think it says we're asking for.
No, so the reason why the other reason why I'm gonna support this tonight is because I went back and looked at the job description. It says a bachelor's degree in public/environmental health or 5 years experience or any equivalent combination of education, training, and experience. So the reason why I'm willing to
You are
support
correct.
this
It
is
said
because
all
it's
5
saying
years experience,
Mr.
yeah.
Pilling could just have, I should just say, the health agent could just have 5
Todd.
years experience and not the degree. So I'm totally okay with
Yeah,
that,
and-
the way
and
that it's worded.
We've actually had a past practice in another department that the person that was hired was doing more, I would call it more like clerical support, but she had a master's degree, and when that was brought to the board a few years ago, we did vote to give the person the money for the degree.
And I will have to go back, and this is a little off topic, I will have to go back into the job descriptions, but for anyone that comes to the board going forward, based on the wording in the job description, I would expect that we will honor this for anybody who checks all the boxes, the language in the job description
Similar to
checks
what you're
out.
talking
Yeah,
about, yes.
correct, because we won't have a case,
Right.
we will be singling people out,
Right.
and we're not gonna do that, so. I actually don't have any other questions. I'm sorry that we had to call you in for a couple of next time I'll send an email, okay, Mr.
Well,
Pires?
just as a FYI, the stormwater, which is falls under Board of Health, wasn't on the original posting nor job description at this time.
That's correct.
One of the reasons the agent that we picked was because of his knowledge of stormwater. And his degree is directly related to that type of work, so. Down the future, I think in the job description, it's, the salary is determined by qualifications. So, kind of getting off track, I'm talking salary now versus
Educational.
the degree. But, you know, at this point, maybe we should update the job description to include stormwater, I don't know.
I will say that I'll just give a suggestion. We did just go through the job descriptions, but I do understand that when Mr. Pilling did come in 2017, we had barely, or we were just, we had just split the Board of Health. And then we did form the Emergency Preparedness Committee, I believe you're on that. And then we also formed the Stormwater Committee as both committees of the Board of Health. So everybody is wearing, you as well, wearing more hats. So, you know, I'm okay to having that discussion is what I'm saying.
I don't want to put all the burden on the chairman. I also asked that you be brought here before us, so that it wasn't just Brett asking questions, it was others that asked questions, so don't just be mad at Brett. Share some of it.
We're glad we were first on the agenda.
And we'd be mad if they were.
You stay here.
So if we do make a motion and it's ratified, do we have to say where the money's coming from? Because they're indicating, chairman's indicating that the money's may not be in your budget, so how can we fund it?
Contingent.
I was going to make a motion contingent on funding. That's why, during the discussion, I'll make some comments. But I will make a motion that we approve the educational incentive for the health agent for his bachelor's degree.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
So you need to speak to Jen and see what money is in your budget that can be used. If there isn't enough money, then you're going to be looking for year end to do a transfer. The other thing that is going to be needed, if the funds are there, she will need a certified sealed transcript from UMass Dartmouth. Amherst, sorry.
Hey,
What's wrong with
Oh, come on,
Dartmouth?
it was SMU back then, wasn't it?
SMTI.
Oh, TI, okay.
It was UMass Dartmouth when I went there. But she will need a certified sealed transcript.
They email them also, is that acceptable, or
No.
does it have to be?
No, she'll want a sealed one,
Okay.
sent directly to her, whatever. That's one of the requirements that.
You can
that they
probably
have.
request it online, though,
Yeah.
Mr.
You
Pilling.
can, and it's.
As long as you can pay
they'll
for
email
it
it directly
online.
to whoever you want for like $3 or $1 million.
I was gonna say-
hard copy for $5.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, so that would be my only comments.
I have a friendly amendment because we didn't specify. The motion should contain whether we're going to do the retro or whether we're going to do it for the next fiscal year. So that would be my
Well,
suggestion.
That's why I said, no, it's this fiscal year, that's why I said he's got to talk to the town accountant to find out if we have the money. My motion, I will add to that motion, Mrs. Brady, effective July 1st, 2018, contingent on funding.
I'll second that amendment.
All right. Any further discussion on this?
I just have one more thing.
Sure.
When other people come out and do this, is it a case-by-case basis before the Board of Selectmen?
I
Is
mean,
that how
if
you'd
they
like to
all
send
want to
this?
rally and come together, that would be great. But my point is, no matter how they come in, if it's one by one or if it's a bunch all together,
has
we
to
have
go.
to honor it. That was, however it shakes out is however it shakes out. Don't go sending emails though to everybody.
Guess what? Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Just a clarification on the funding,
Sure.
which would include also year-end transfers, correct? Not necessarily from the 50 line, it could also come from the 70 line.
After May
After
1st.
we-
After the 1st of May?
Yeah, that's when you can transfer from the expenses to the personnel.
Because we don't have to do anything special with the 50 line, and 70 line, but good, all right.
But there
I
may be
understand.
another budget that already has personnel that it's not being touched, so.
Right.
Yeah, if you work that out with her ahead of time, you should be all set.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Excuse me, you need a vote on the amendment first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the vote we're taking now, right?
Okay, yep.
Aye.
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 And now, vote on the motion as amended.
All right, and now let's vote on the motion as amended.
Aye.
Aye. No abstentions, no nays. The ayes have it. That motion passes. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Do we have anything
Keep
else
up the
for
good work.
Board of
Mr.
Health?
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Do we have anything else for Board of Health?
No, I don't believe so.
I've offered to stand by for a while. There is an item on there about the housing production plan.
Okay.
Oh, that
Yep.
makes sense.
Oh,
I'm sorry, that makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Chairman, could we take agenda item,
Excuse
Eight.
me,
We're
are you
gonna-
here for public input?
I think Mr. Perry
oh,
has
sorry.
indicated, no, it's okay. He indicated to me before the meeting that he had something very important to say, so
I just
public
didn't want to
input.
wait till the end of the meeting.
No, it's okay.
I would,
Mr.
thank you,
Perry.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You want me to stand up there?
Sure. Okay, be recorded.
I'm not gonna force you to.
Thank you.
It's an honor,
Yeah.
it's an honor.
No, I would very publicly like to thank the members of our fire department. Today, when I got home from an errand, my carbon monoxide alarm was going off. So I went in and reset it, kept going off. I called the fire department. Within 10 minutes, the chief was there, there was a police officer there also. Chief was there, fire trucks galore, people, the fire department was running in and out of my house testing for carbon monoxide, which most certainly was there. They went through the whole house. They found the source. And as a result of that, I was able to get a hold of my oil company. They came out, fire department, I told them what the fire department had found, and I have heat tonight, again. What I wanted to tell you was, the response was rapid, their actions were professional and incredibly thorough, and I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank our fire department, and that's all I have.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you very
for coming
much.
in.
Really appreciate
Mr.
it.
Perry?
Yeah.
Can you just share what the problem was for other people that they should be kind of aware?
Absolutely. When the oil company came out, my furnace is about 30 years old. And the technician explained to me that there's a lining inside the furnace that as time goes on, may start to crumble and whatever. And I have an oil furnace. And the material that had crumbled down has about this much freeboard between the bottom of the furnace and where the oil actually comes out of the nozzle. And that had built right up to the point where the flame could come out about so far, and then it was creating, I guess, a turbulence in there, and the exhaust, most of it, was going out through the wind damper and right into the basement. And later on, I checked the chimney, by the way, the chimney is perfectly clear, so that's what happened. So I guess I would say if you want to shut your furnace off and there's a little peephole to look in, if it's filling up, you might want to contact your oil company. This happened, there was no indication that this was going to occur. There was no, in the past few weeks, there's no smoke, no puffing, no trouble with the ignition. It just happened. And I'm very
Scary.
fortunate that I have the carbon monoxide alarms. And again, very public thank you for to our fire department. I think the key words are responsive, professional, and thorough. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming in.
Thanks
you,
for
and I'm
coming
glad
in.
everything was okay, Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too, thank you.
This is a good announcement,
Sure.
or time, because it's coming up on daylight savings time in a few weeks, and that's when they tell you to check the batteries, change the batteries, and test. So, PSA, test your carbon monoxide detectors.
Absolutely. So at this time, colleagues, I will accept motions to move out of order.
I'll make a motion that we go to 8E, vote to approve the housing production plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes. Selectman
So,
Pacheco.
as you know, you asked me to be a member of the 40B committee, and Mr. Pires, who is the chairman, is also here. We come up with a housing production plan for the town. This is our third housing production plan. First was in 2008, the second was 2014, and this is now 2019. It's 92 pages. I hope everybody has had an opportunity to study it, and
Are you quizzing us this evening?
no, I'm not going to quiz you, but the value of this, it kind of tells us what the needs are for the town. We don't have our 10% affordable housing in town. We have 5.6%. It's probably going to go down when the new census comes out in 2020. So it's our goal to set, to try to get to that 10% affordable housing in town. And I can tell you that the 40B committee is looking at some property that the town owns, possibility of some affordable housing. I personally would like senior affordable housing to come to town. I think that's the best bet for the town. And this kind of gives you some ideas. Some of the numbers in here, and we brought it to their attention, are not correct. It says we're going to have, I think by 2020, 8,000 and something. We're already at 8,000. Well, actually, it's not too far away, but it's still below they're giving the wrong figures that I could see in a couple of the charts.
They use crazy, but they use 2010 census when they do a lot of the demographics.
But they know how many houses we built in town. They can get that from the building commissioner. So,
Can I ask you a question about that, Selectman Pacheco and Chairman Pires, whoever? Regarding having affordable housing, so in my mind, I'm thinking there's a couple of reasons why it's good. One of them would be, the more you have, the more likely you are to reach your 10%, of course. And then after that 10%, theoretically, the town has a little more control in certain projects. Is there any positive for affordable housing in terms of, for example, what folks are paying for like residential taxes and things like that?
Well, they get a tax break. The people who have the affordable housing gets a tax break because they're paying on the value of that house. And if it's an affordable house, say in one of our 40B developments, the price of the house is less, and so that they get taxed on what the value of the house is, because that's in perpetuity. That's an affordable house for perpetuity. But what this shows here, what this production plan shows, is that the biggest demographic change in our town, and it goes back to 2016 when I turned that age. I'm probably the only member here that can say that, but when I turned 65, that's the biggest group in town that's grown the fastest. So it's something that we have to stop.
Thank you.
This was for, yes.
I want to say thank you.
Yes, I was waiting for Mr. Pires to say something too, but he's not going to be.
He's on his best behavior.
Yeah, so, but this is a group that we have to worry about. So every time, separate from this, but every time we talk about increasing the taxes for the town, this is a group that gets hit with it the worst. 9% of the seniors in this town are in poverty level, $25,000 or less is something we have to take into consideration all the time. So what they're looking, if they want to stay in town, they're looking for smaller houses, and that's something that we have to kind of be looking forward to. So whether the 40B committee will eventually go to the planning board, I know he wears two hats, and ask for some zoning change, I'm not sure. We've got another 40B coming into town, it's still not going to, even if that gets approved, it's still not going to be at that 10%. So we have to look at a possible a way to get to that 10%. One of those methods is to have senior housing or senior and disabled affordable housing. So we'll look at some land that's available in town that may, we don't have sewage, so that becomes a part of the town, so that becomes a problem. But we're looking at different lands that are available. So
Get about the percentage, other than the 10%, the other way that we can deny.
if you go to 0.5% per year, which is 13,
Well,
yeah, 13, but
1.5%. We can also, if we meet the other standard, which is 1.5% annually of the housing stock, which according to the 2010s is 13 units a year. If we do that for 2 years, we can start denying.
And I didn't mean it, Chairman Pires, that we want to start denying, affordable housing permits. I just mean it's always good to have to retain local control, that's all, because then you have a more active role in the planning of your community. So for anybody watching, I'm not advocating to deny affordable housing. My concern from being on this, part of the dais is just control, local control.
Sure, and with 40Bs, you don't have that much control. We've approved, I've mentioned numerous times, but we've approved 70 40Bs in town. 4 active, one is still out there in litigation, 2 aren't going to happen. So we have to be concerned about that. And I'm not happy with the law itself, because the state has mandated that we have to have 10%, but yet they're not giving us money for our schools and everything else. And when you have a 40B that comes before you in the zoning board, you can't address fire, you can't address schools. So I'm very disappointed in that. I am in favor of having affordable housing. People need it. It could be family members. I mean, it could be us. I mean, it could be, but I mean, that's a reality, that we have people in town that could benefit from affordable housing, people who are disabled, people who are elderly. So I think it's 0.5% per year. If we get a full 2 years at 1%, then we can stop any affordable 40B from coming in for a short period of time while we're going through that. But that's 13 houses. It's 13 houses, like you said, 13 houses a year, which is a lot of affordable housing to get into a town. So if you're talking about, people don't like it, but maybe senior apartments, affordable housing, that's one way to get to that number very quick, because even if you have 25% of those apartments to be for affordable housing or affordable units, the whole 100% count towards towards the affordable units in town. So
Senior housing is a no-brainer. I totally agree with you.
yeah, so we don't have that many possibilities, but we're looking at land in town, and Mr. Pius is more familiar with some of the lands than I am, so it's,
So the 40B committee, it sounds like, is working with who on this?
Well,
On
we-
the senior, kind of starting?
we're working with ourselves, but there's, I couldn't bring it up at the last meeting because it wasn't on the agenda, but there was a contact that I made when I was at the MMA regarding senior housing, and he's willing to come down and talk to us about some possible grants and monies that are
Okay.
available from the state.
See, I didn't
So
know.
that's going to come, that'll be to the 40B committee, maybe we'll expand that information.
I
I'm not
think
sure.
it's very appropriate. The reason I asked that question, just to clarify, is because I think it's the most appropriate that the 40B committee, and of course the broader zoning board of appeals, be the folks who handle that, because you generated the housing production plan. I'm pretty sure you did the first one. I mean, you've done it every year. Like, nobody knows more than you all do on how we can meet that threshold.
And obviously, we'll come back to the town, but this particular 40B committee has a good representation from different boards, and it's a more active committee, I would think, than in the past. So we're trying to be proactive based on the information that's in here. So we're before you asking that the planning board has to approve this, but we're asking that, and I think you may be voting on it next week, but we're asking that.
The planning board did approve it by vote
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
3-2.
May I ask, Chairman Pius, what were the two concerns? Why
Well,
were
they
there
really
two?
didn't have the time to, they wanted more time to go over it. Even though you have to understand that this is just a guideline, it's a reference guide. Nothing in there is binding or mandatory. It's just suggestions from the committee going forward on the best ways to produce affordable housing and try to hit the 10%. I'm not a fan of 40Bs, never have been, I've made that clear. But the fact of the matter is, this is something the state requires.
Correct.
So you have to live with it until they change Chapter 40. And what we did, because I don't believe we'll ever hit 10% through conventional 40Bs.
And that's because there's always like things
Always
like
more
Form A lots
houses.
are being built and things, which raises
Or
the number needed. Okay.
more market housing
You
is
gotta build
being built.
130 to get 13.
So what we're looking
It's
for
actually,
now is
less than
alternatives
It's,
to a 40B, whether that be, for example, if we allowed duplexes as a matter of right, and one condition is that one of the units would be an affordable unit, or a two-family conversion, one of the units be affordable. So building on undersized lots, not conventional lots that meet our zoning requirements, you know, maybe short frontage. We have some nice property in town where there's one, especially on Horton Street, is 4 acres of land, it's got 150 feet frontage. You know, by standards, it's not a buildable lot, but it would be perfect for 1 or 2 affordable units. So we're looking at all the alternatives. The best thing for the town is no doubt rentals, you mentioned that, right? So that would bring us up to where we need to be quickly, more quickly than anything else.
Right, we had the 40B Somerset Woods a few years ago, and I wasn't part of that voting on it or any part of it. But that was 180 apartment units, 25% were going to be affordable. That would have gotten us over would have been more than 10% for the town. And just a correction, it's 25, so you have 100 units, it's 25% of those have to be affordable if it's a 40B, so 100 houses
Oh,
would be
wow.
25 houses.
Okay.
But don't forget, you're adding 75 more houses to the,
Exactly.
Correct.
you know, so you're always fighting it, so I don't want to belabor this, but it is a good report. It gives us some guidance. We're doing some of the things already. Accessory apartments, we've changed the bylaw for accessory apartments called in-law apartments, so it makes it easier for us to have some affordable,
I think
more affordable
you, I
units.
think you did a fantastic
Okay,
job.
I have one request. I haven't started through it. I got to page 47 or 8 today. I'm in the graphs. And in the narrative that I have read, didn't have my red pen, but I had my black pen, and I have marked it up in several areas. There are some conflicting statements. There's the usual grammatical things. I've written some questions, and I'd like a little bit more time so I can finish it, and I would like to talk to Mr. Pius and give him a copy of what I marked up, because there are some inaccuracies in there. I didn't get into graphs, meaning I noticed the census, and I know you have to use the federal census, so I didn't even look at those, okay? But there's some areas in there that I would at least like to get my questions answered and also just show those to you. It needs to be retyped, okay? But they're the kind of things that are in there, the questions need to be answered too. It won't affect the overall plan, all right? But I think since we're gonna have it on file and we've got to vote to accept it, I would like to have the opportunity to go through the rest of it. It is a big document.
Yeah, I agree, it is a big document, but that would be a little troubling because it'd have to go back to, if there's any changes, it'd have to go back to the 40B committee, then go back and have SERPA get involved with it again, then have it go back to the planning board, and have,
Thank-
you know,
To just touch on what some of the problems were, does it require another approval? DHCD is already.
I don't believe it will require a vote of anybody except the Board of Selectmen, but I think that the questions that I raised are.
But I guess my point is, if you've already stated it's not gonna change anything, why are we doing this?
And the deadline to submit this. and the
Expires
vote-
17th.
they've given us some extra time. I think it was, might have been a little, due a little earlier than that. But it doesn't, this is a guide, so this isn't, what's in here isn't written in stone. None of this stuff here we have to do. It's just telling us, or telling the town, based on the information, this is some of the things that we probably should do. I think the last 2 housing production plans, I'm not sure how much changes we did in town, maybe.
They probably had the same errors.
Yeah, it could have had the same, you know, but
Are you using the same template?
it's not actually,
SERPA did this.
yes.
I believe
So, and they did a lot of work, so it's nothing against them. And we, a couple of times, we met with them 3 or 4 or 5 times, we pointed out the errors that and I still, looking at it again today, I see some of those errors, but it doesn't, you know, like I said, it's showing us that by 2020,
I'm not sure by delaying it would make a difference as far as the timeline. I would have to find out tomorrow if they're willing to, I would suppose if it expires and we come up with a new one, it's good.
My whole point is, why would we delay it for something that's not changing the content or the meaning?
But it
or-
is.
or
I talked
anything?
about the narrative. I didn't question the statistics because the statistics have to be based on the last federal census, which is the point that Mr. Pacheco brought up. And as you said, yeah, it's 2010. Next year will be the next one. There's 2 sections in here that talk about transportation. One of them talks about 2 stations in time. one clearly states one station in Taunton. That needs to be corrected. That's old data, all right? There is,
But that's still not changing any of the actual content. That's just like I see here, you have bylaw where there's a hyphen. Like that's not, I don't think that that's a
We're not-
reason to
we're not
delay
gonna-
anything.
No, you know, we're not gonna.
I think if this board is going to vote on a document that's going to be on the record for the next however many years,
5 years.
it should be as accurate as possible. And since I've done most of the work and I'm willing to do the rest of it, I really think this needs to go to whoever prepared this, and the changes should, the corrections should be made. I mean, as you can see, this is not one here. I started out and thinking it's one here and one there, and then I kept going and said, no, it's not one here and one here. There's reference to Chapter 40B, 20 through 23. Well, what is 20 through 23? You have to, in effect, put in there the sections. I assume those are sections. I don't know if those are sections of the law. I would have to look at that. Again, I'm reading this on the train today, so this is not like I have references there. The questions that I had related to, and I don't know now, let me see. I know I wrote questions. See the statistical stuff, I don't have a problem with this. Okay, there is a whole section here on Dayton Rehoboth Regional School District student enrollment, and prior to the graft, it talks about the makeup of our schools, one elementary, they call intermediate, one intermediary. We have an elementary, a middle, and a high school, which we all know. It also mentions Bristol, Plymouth, and the Aggie School, and that other children attend maybe parochial school, charter school, so forth and so on. Since we're talking about the town and the growth of the town, specifically education, my question is, how many school-aged children are there in Dayton, including home-school children? Every October 1st, a report has to be filed with the state indicating school-aged children. Children who are not educated in public schools have to be accounted for, so the data is there. So my only question is, if we're going to talk about the number of school-aged children in the town of Dayton, not just the ones that attend our system, those children should be counted, all right? We may have, well, it was 3,316, it dropped to 2,900 as of 2017-18. But we're looking out, we're trying to project out. There are, let's assume all the parochial schools in this area where kids would be going, closed. They're coming back into the public schools or something. So what I'm saying is the data is available, school-age attending children. We have to know where all of our kids are being educated, whether we educate them or not, or if they're homeschooled.
This is the housing production plan. This isn't
Right,
the
we're not-
school production.
We're not,
No,
that's a
no.
whole different thing, the school
No,
has to.
no, I'm talking about the section that was in here about what I'm saying to you is, this talks only about the children in the Dayton Rehoboth
We
system.
got that. We understand that.
This town has children who are counted in the population who don't attend Dayton Rehoboth schools. And the data is readily available because the October 1st enrollment would have it.
But that's not changing anything to do with the point of the housing production plan. All I'm
What
saying
it
is
would
it's not
do-
worth it to delay it for something that doesn't change
What
the
it would do
outcome
is
of the
enhance
document.
the data and cover, this number would increase, okay? There's more than 2,900 children in this town who are school-aged children, and they're hopefully all attending school somewhere, or
They could
they're
be
being
homeschooled,
homeschooled.
but it
That's my
doesn't-
point. That's why the
Doesn't
department head
impact, though,
requires you to report
the
it.
housing production plan, though, for the town, so. I'm-
Are in-law apartments considered part of multi-unit housing?
Listen, I don't mind myself as, you know, I'm not gonna be involved in this discussion. I don't mind taking the time and bringing it to circuit if it doesn't, you know, and have them at least address their concerns.
But I would only ask you to invest the time doing that, Chairman Pires, because you would be doing it on your own time. I would only ask you to do that if it was important to the point of the document and the conclusions it has drawn about housing. The concerns that have been raised
I
don't
see what you're
rise.
saying.
Children, population, equal housing.
So we have a logistical issue here if you did do this, because the deadline to submit our approval is the 17th of this month. If there were changes, you would have to go back through all the voting. So, I mean, we can hash
And
this
what I'm
out here,
saying
but it
is we
still
don't
needs
have
to
do
go
that,
back.
Because this doesn't rise to, now we have a critical effect on the document as prepared. So that's all I'm saying.
Here's another one. Sewer service is limited to the North Dayton Village area. We all know that's not true.
Let's travel down further.
Goes all the way
And
to the
And I
North
believe
Station.
it was addressed at one of our meetings too, but anyway, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the Dayton Housing Production Plan 2019.
I will step down and second that motion. Discussion?
If you didn't want feedback, why did you give it to me and ask me to look at it?
It says vote to approve.
That's
So-
not what my question is. I want to answer to the question. I was given this and
Well-
asked to look at it. I said, okay, I will. So now that I found some things that I believe should be changed, it doesn't matter. Well, what's the point? Now, I assume you both read this also. So why weren't the changes
I
made?
was okay with a couple misspellings. Chairman Pires.
I'm gonna leave and let you go on with your discussion.
You sure you don't want to stay?
However, I think Mrs. Goulart has a point, and maybe if you approve or disapprove, or whatever you decide, certainly we can address her concerns and get this amended without any interruption of the time frame. That's what I think. We should be able to amend this and without a whole lot of voting all over again.
I'm just saying we don't need to
But
be in a
you
complete
do what
state
you wanna
of
do tonight,
paralysis
because I'm
over a
working.
couple inaccuracies.
I'm willing to make an amendment, offer an amendment to the motion that approval will be contingent upon the document being submitted back to Serped for what you consider minor corrections.
I didn't hear a second. So the amendment's defeated. So we're back at the original document, right? Okay. So we have a motion and a second on the housing production plan as prepared. Any further discussion on this?
Do you want me to finish reading this? And do you want feedback?
You're allowed to, we're in discussion. Mrs. Goulart's allowed to state her piece.
Mr. Pacheco gave this to me last week and said, here's the housing plan, you might want to take a look at it. That's exactly what I've been doing. And I only got through page 45 on the train today, okay?
Well, we were given this earlier by email. I just happened to be making my copy, so I said, I asked you, would you like your own copy? Because
Right.
I was doing double-sided, I can hit 2 versus 1 copy, and I did it as a convenience, but it was available earlier. Now, much earlier, not really, not really.
Well, the other thing we have to consider is the other workload I have for the town.
Sure, no, I'm,
So that's the only reason that I didn't get to it sooner, is because I had other things I had to take care
you
of.
made it sound like I just gave it to you.
No, no,
I gave it
no.
to you because I was making a copy for myself.
No, no.
And I just wanted,
I got it last week and I appreciate it, that's why I had it with me today. So my only question is, since you're chairman of that committee, are you comfortable with an amendment like that?
It was already
I'm
defeated.
comfortable.
It was
with-
already
There was no
defeated. I don't
second.
think you need to really elaborate on
I'm
that.
not gonna get into your discussion or with your vote, because, you know, you are our selectman. I do believe, however, no matter which way you vote, even if you vote up, that it can be amended without any other issues. We can bring it back to Serpent's attention and say, we'd like this amended, it has been approved. Or if it's disapproved, then, you know. But I think we can amend it after a vote.
I think that has to come back to the board again, as well as the planning board and the 40B if it's
Now
amended.
we're back in the state of paralysis.
Well, we also, so what would happen if that was the case is that a listing of the changes would be compiled separate, and everybody who had seen the document originally would be apprised of all of the changes. And if they felt that they needed to intervene and you know, if they maybe had a comment on something that Selectman Goulart found, if they agreed or didn't agree, then they would have to re-vote it, because your planning board voted on a document that they had in front of them, and it's going to be different than whatever comes out of the revisions or whatever that we have. So we do have a point of order, we have to take a vote on this.
So if Mrs. Goulart wants to give the 40B committee some inaccuracies that she's pointed out in this, I have no problem with that going back to the 40B committee. And if the 40B committee meets again with Serpent, we have some changes that it can all go through the different boards. I do want this one to be sent right now so that we're in compliance. And if we make amendments, we'll make amendments. Quite frankly, I'm not concerned about any grammatical errors in this at all. I'm just, if there's stats in here that are incorrect, doesn't change the whole philosophy behind this, but there are some figures, Mrs. Goulart is correct, figures that are wrong. Sewage, one of the items is sewage. It's in 2 parts of town, it's not just in one. So, once we take a vote, hopefully we're going to approve this. If Mrs. Goulart wishes to make any changes, she can submit them to the 40B.
What I find kind of ironic is that Serpent prepared it and DHCD approved it. You know, so, but they're not aware of the situation that's come up here. I don't believe it changes it to the extent, certainly it can come back to the board with those changes. It's up to you.
Well, just to end the discussion, I'm happy that you went through it and found a bunch of things. If we had more time, I would totally be amenable to fleshing those out for a finalized document. But if it's not rising to, I guess my standard of it's changing the intent and the outcome of the document, then I don't see a reason to delay it for that reason. So that's why.
That's why I proposed the amendment for a contingent vote, because this way it can be submitted, it can go. If Mr. Pius is willing, if he's willing to look at this whole document, I'm willing to go through the rest of it, give him a photocopy, and I can sit with him and just get my own questions answered, and then he can meet with the committee or whatever. I don't want to miss a deadline. The order of operations, quite frankly, are a little strange that the governing board, the elected board, is the last one to get it, and it's already been approved in Boston, or wherever they are.
Well, the governing board, what was it, planning, 40B and then planning, right?
No, the Board of Selectmen is the governing board in the town. That's who I'm referring to. But that was my point in attempting to do that amendment. So my question to you, Mr. Pius, is if I go through the rest of it and give you a copy, are you willing to sit with me so I can get my answers and you can see what I'm talking about?
I think we need to consider, can it be extended?
So we're talking about something that was already defeated. There was an amendment, there was no second. So now before us is, we're going to take a vote on the housing production plan as prepared.
No, we're in discussion, and I asked Mr. Pius, as chairman of that committee, separate from the motion and the second, I am asking him directly, if I finish going through it and give you a copy, can we just sit and go over it? Aside from the deadline, I don't want to hold anything up. All I want to know is, if no one's going to look at the changes that I have found, and nobody wants to hear about them, I'm not going to go through the rest of this. That's all I'm saying. I just need to know whether or not you want to see a copy of what I marked up. That's the question I have.
I don't mind looking at it.
Okay, thank you.
You know, if it's going to delay it, then
No, I don't want to delay anything. That's why I made the contingency motion, but that died. So I just want to know if I go through the rest of it.
I don't mind looking at it.
Okay, thank you.
And I would make the presentation of your comments to the board at our next meeting. And then we'll decide what we're doing from there. But I'm going to find out, though, for future, if I'm still on this. Do we, if we suggest some changes after the deadline, and it's not approved.
But we have changes before the deadline. I'm also concerned as to why the state has gotten this plan before we actually had an opportunity to read through it. I'm only about halfway through. I mean, I don't have as many revisions or anything like that, that would warrant me going to, but I feel that it's a valid point, and I think it makes sense that if we were to just take what the comments were, you were amenable as the 40B committee chairman, if it rose to a level to just send it to Serpide, the worst case is that we'd have it in 5 years and it would be corrected for the next one. That's the worst thing that would happen.
I'm starting to feel like, so the board already agreed we were gonna vote on this essentially without the changes. So if you two wanna do the changes thing, I feel like that's now a conversation outside this meeting because the board already spoke on that.
And I think that's what Mrs. Goulart.
Okay, so what I'm saying is the discussion on that is now over because that conversation was had. And is there any further discussion?
Just
Give you a
that,
copy of it, too.
yeah, just before Mrs. Gual goes through all that work, make sure that we can make amendments once we submit it. That's, you know, if they're not going to allow any changes, then you two don't need to sit down.
Well, the other thing, too, is
I think it's,
somebody got paid to do this. And if nothing else, even if we don't change whatever's filed wherever out there, whoever physically put it together should see the changes should be made so that when it comes up in who knows how many years, whatever, nobody else is going to have to go through this and make all these things
if
again.
it's changes to do as far as the student population, that sounds like part of the demographics of the town. So we're not really changing the intent of the plan, we're just updating the demographics.
So now we've arrived back at the point, which was my first point. So
It
we're
doesn't really
done
change
with
the
discussion.
plan.
We
We're
take-
done with
we take a
discussion
vote.
and we are gonna take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes. Thank you for putting up with us this
Thank you,
evening,
Mr.
Chairman
Pius.
Pius.
I'll be in touch with you, Tom. Thank you.
We just want to make sure we get you home for dinner, my friend.
Close.
Thank you.
Well, good night.
Have a
Good
good
night.
evening. And at this time, I yield the floor. Oh, let me just route, did you have any public? We now have public. Did you have anything? All right, thank you for joining us this evening. I yield the floor, Madam Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my report's a little long tonight, and I apologize. The first one is about recommendations for salary increases based on evaluations. At our last meeting, we discussed that we did perform the evaluations. We were talking about whether or not these department heads would come in with certain salary requests and how we would manage that, because the whole point of the evaluation process was to determine who gets what when it's budget increase time. So I gave you this little, it's a spreadsheet, and it's not a good one, but just my stab at it. So based upon the number of points that you could receive in a perfect evaluation, and then the number of points that you, did you get, oh, you might not have received
didn't-
that
I
because
did
you
not get
picked up
that.
your packet early like a good person.
Thank you.
So based upon your score, based upon, you know, the points you received over the points you could have gotten, you would get, you know, a score. So if you received all threes, and the 3 rating is that you are just meeting expectations. You are doing your job, you are not a shining star, you're just meeting them and doing what we've asked you and what we pay you for. So I wrote no increase there as a recommendation. It's not a merit if they're not reaching anything or achieving anything. Then for the next interval, 2%, and then up 3 to 4% or 4 to 5% at the very highest. This is sort of arbitrary. I'm really leaving this to you. The only thing I do need to mention is the building commissioner. He's the only one I need to single out. When we reviewed all of the job descriptions, we added facilities management. When you approved that, I had indicated to you, if you did go forward and approve the facilities management component into the building department, it would come with discussions of a contract or an increase. So he's requesting a salary here. I don't know if you want to go forward and
I
have that
think we need
conversation,
to,
but it's
let's,
more
I
than
think
the
we should
increase.
just, instead of getting into the nuts and bolts, I don't agree with the salary structure increase as presented tonight. Here's what I think we should do. All 3s, no increase, totally agree, no argument there. 0.80, 0.63 to 0.80 on your evaluation. I think instead of 2%, that should be 1%. 0.83 to 0.89 and 0.91 or higher, I made no distinction, and I just said you get 2%. And the reason I did is because I'm not sure it's sustainable every year, because we do have superstars, and we're lucky that we have a lot of superstars. We cannot afford to give people 5% extra every year. And I love these people, by the way.
I
If you're
agree.
watching, you're all amazing,
So-
superstars, but
I started at the 2% because it has been historically that you gave 2% every year.
So, but
with
we're not-
no evaluation. I just wanted to explain where
correct,
it
so
came from.
that we're changing. So
Yes.
now we want people to have an incentive and not just think, okay, I can meet expectations and get 2%, because then there's no incentive to be a superstar. So I feel like it's better to have it just be no increase, all threes, 1%, and then 2% if you're, above the .80 threshold. But at this time, I will yield, that's all I think about it, so.
Yeah,
Selectman
sure.
Pacheco.
I'm not a big fan of this. I think if you have a good evaluation, that's great. I know when I worked in professional field, I did my best. I look forward to having a good evaluation. I did not expect to get a pay increase because I just wanted somebody to say I'm doing a good job, and we should all want to do the best we can. So I'm not crazy about putting this in writing, that this is something that people are going to get if they have a good evaluation. A lot of evaluations are subjective, so I think we got to be careful with this. So I don't want to start somebody getting a 5% increase. I mean, they could get it every year, have an
That's what-
excellent evaluation, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman. So I'm not crazy about this. I do, you singled out the building commission. We did change his duties and responsibility. That's a whole different thing, but I don't want, if they think they deserve an increase, let them come to the board or come to the town administrator and ask for an increase. But I don't want to put something in writing that you score this way, you're going to get this percentage. And it's not fair to the taxpayers, too. So they're not getting 3, 4, 5% increases in their wages. Taxes are going to go up 3, 4, 5% maybe, but I don't want to set something like this in writing, so I'm opposed to this. Appreciate the work you've done, town administrator, but I'm opposed to this.
Selectman Goulart.
My concern is an issue of fairness, not in this breakdown, because the whole point in having our scoring system, when Mrs. Aaronstein and I put this together, we had to come up with a way to distinguish, to
Correct.
rank, to rate, whatever. I don't know how we're going to determine increases for the people we evaluated fairly, because, and this is not meant as a derogatory remark, but if you're in the union, you're gonna get 2%, period.
Correct.
Not that their performance isn't good or anything else. All I'm saying is, the finance committee asked us, along with what we were doing, to come up with a system for the people who would fall within the category, which we did. The ranking and all that, the procedure, all of that, yeah, we worked that out, that went okay. I don't really know how we're gonna determine increases for this group of people,
And it is
or
difficult
individuals,
because
I don't know.
if you take one person with a higher salary because perhaps they have a little bit more responsibility, their percentage at 2% is higher than somebody else who's getting 2% that might not have so much responsibility. So there's that inequity. It is not easy. I'm not in love with this system either. It's just I thought this was the easiest to present and be the
It's
most
fair and equitable.
But I
based on
understand
the evaluation,
completely your
if that's
concern.
fair.
I think we did do what the finance committee asked. We did put together a procedure. I think it worked well. I think it worked excellently, to be honest. So it's a good evaluation form. It's a good procedure. We've tested it and it works. I like it. So I think we've come a long way from last year, and I think we've satisfied the finance committee's request for us to do it. So
Here
if
is my concern, though, is, so I agree with you, Selectman Pacheco. Obviously, I agree with what you're saying as well, and we appreciate you and the town administrator taking the time to do all of that legwork. Here's my issue. My issue is we do have to have, and I'm not saying this one on paper tonight is the system. When someone does come before the board, we then have to have a system from that point on that is fair and equitable, so when the next person comes, there's some sort of criteria that we're judging. It's not, I understand it's case by case, but the outcome has to have some sort of criteria that's objective, as possible, I should say, so that people are given a decision on whether or not they will have a salary increase across the board. So, I guess that's my
Like
concern.
records of achievement, I guess, to weigh
Correct.
into the decision.
And then
I-
a way to evaluate
Right.
that.
And I do just want to
across
say,
the
I
board.
took everybody's score and I was like, okay, so here's the system, where does it fall in actuality?
Mm-hmm.
Most people were at 3%. Just to give you a kind of baseline, most people were at 3. I
think-
just wanted to share that information.
Yeah, I
That's
was gonna say, I read all of them, and I didn't see any in the, I'll call it the lower range. And the other thing that these employees have to understand, every year they will be evaluated. Their score will probably change, and there could be a certain percent this year, but maybe next year something happens and the percentage is lower. It doesn't mean it's gonna be, it'll only do this, it
Right.
could, you know.
And that's life ebbs and flows like that, so.
But I, as I say, at this point, having read them all and looked at everything, the procedure worked. The scoring that the scoring was pretty much what we changed over the basic form that I presented. The only thing that I can see that we need to add is that signature line that says, my
Oh,
signature
sure,
means
yes.
I read it,
Not that
whatever.
you- Right.
Yeah. Other than that, like I say, I think the instrument that we developed, we adapted or adopted, however you want to put it. I think that all worked. I don't really have a recommendation about the salary
So-
thing here.
I'm
So can I
hearing-
make a suggestion? Since, I'm gonna make a suggestion based on what I'm hearing. So since you both worked well on doing the actual
You know who this assignment's gonna
evaluation-
go
I know, we're just a good team.
Hey,
and it's-
I'll do it if you want. I just figured it was started already, like you fleshed out the evaluation process. So it made sense to flesh out any sort of process to determine increases. But I will stress it, and I agree, I think we need some information. I think we need to revise this a little bit and think outside of the box, but we do have to have something, so when I agree with Selectman Pacheco, we should allow, it shouldn't be automatic, it should be when someone makes the request, which is, I've told
So
people
this is-
before this, but we have to have some sort of objective way when they do come before the board to handle those.
So I think, I'm hearing from Selectman Pacheco that he doesn't want it to just be automatic, that if you figure out that you're in this percentage range and you just get it, and it's not sustainable, I agree. And that we do want to have some system. So right now what happens is a department head submits their budget, you all review it, you make your recommendations to the finance committee, and they review it and make their recommendations. For this year, let's stick with that original process. We can work together and that we're not rushing for budget time and develop what we find to be a fair, good guide for how you determine it. And I can do some digging around about how people take evaluations and then translate it into a raise. The
I'm
only
glad you
issue
brought
is
that up.
you have to find the communities that do the evaluations religiously and every year like we're planning on doing.
But why couldn't
We-
you go back to the community whose form we used?
It was the university.
We smushed four different.
Oh, that's right.
It was
Oh,
a
I'm thinking of the
university and.
first one.
No. So we did the
Okay.
university and 3 different communities.
Yep.
And got this
Yeah, we
one.
got the scoring from the
I'm
communities.
sorry, I was
Yeah.
thinking of her first evaluation.
No, no,
I
we
can
got
tell
it from
you
the
that, so
university.
we integrated goals into this evaluation process. In West Bridgewater, your increase was tied to a goal. Each goal was 0.5% or 0.25%. So you did 4 goals, you got a 2% increase.
You know,
I mean,
another-
you can do it on achievement.
Another
but-
thought, since you were talking about Mrs. Aaronstein and me, the work that we did. Do you think it would be worth it if we sat down with those evaluations? And in addition to the ranking, last year we didn't have ranking, but we recommended 2 increases. FinCom approved the first one, the second one went to town meeting for approval. And it got approved. And both of those were pretty much based on, not formal evaluation, but truly a merit increase, looking at the work that had, and the duties and all of that. And I'm just wondering for this year, so we have budget information, if we sat down, you and I sat down, we could just look at these and think about what happened last year and think about if there's a way for us to pass these out. And bring those back to the board and say, what do you think about this?
And we
I don't know
can-
what else to do.
We can do that when we review the budgets as a whole. We can present that. So we give ourselves some time.
Okay.
And I'm happy to do that, absolutely.
Okay,
And I'm okay. I just want the board to know, I have no, like, strict ideology on how it should be. I think the most important thing is that it's fair and equitable, because that was the whole point of doing the performance evaluation, yeah. But I agree, I want to emphasize, I agree with Selectman Pacheco, you hit the nail on the head. I do think, because I've had this conversation with employees here who felt like their work was worth more than what they were currently getting. And I told them the same thing that you just said, which was, if you feel that you are worth something, then the only way I can know that is if you let me know. So I don't think that it should be automatic. I do think there needs to be some sort of case-by-case evaluation.
it's
Yeah.
difficult for employees to step up and say, hey, I think I should get.
But now we have this process, so I think that was the board's tacit way of saying, hey, we're amenable to it. You
Right.
know, you still need to advocate for yourself.
So I think we've got what we're doing with this, and I'd be happy to work with Selectman Goulart on that.
Yeah, we'll,
Regarding the building commissioner, he's submitted a budget. We can just handle it like we've done previously.
And I think we should.
Okay, so
Yep.
we can,
I think also if there's a change in duties of any of the people that are in this evaluation package, that's a whole nother ballgame.
That's a whole
When
different.
he's the only one.
Right.
He's
Yeah.
really the only one, and I wanted that to be up
Well,
front
no,
when we
there
talked
was
about
the
it.
discussion with the health agent this evening, so.
But they didn't add that to
Correct.
his, so.
Agreed.
But his
Agreed.
the building commissioner's actual job description is different
Yes.
with added duties. That is approved and he's agreed to it. Okay, so thank you very much.
So no, I
Yeah.
think Selectman Pacheco.
Just one more,
Sure.
and Mr. Chairman, if I'm off subject, by all means, tell me. Regarding Mrs. Aristein's evaluation, I'm going to suggest that we can vote on it at the next meeting, put on the agenda, that we do her evaluation in July and not in May. And I'm saying it because we got the town meeting, we got the warrants, we got all that stuff. We just delayed a little bit. We can put it on it as an agenda item next meeting, meeting after, but I do want to delay it a little bit because we're really going to be busy around that time, and I don't think the
Isn't there
board's
a
gonna-
date in your
My
contract?
contract says May 30th specifically. I've raised it to this board that it's a little weird because what if May 30th is a Saturday or a Sunday? We're not going to convene.
Oh, yes, we will, I guess. Apparently, if it's May
We'll all be
30th.
here.
You'll be the acting chairman that meeting.
So it is, it would require a vote to change it, but there's nothing that says you can't change it. You would
So,
just vote to change it.
Right, so
I have no issue with that.
okay, so we
Selectman
can't do that tonight, I don't think, because it's not on the agenda, but maybe the next meeting or two that we,
Mrs.
address it.
Brady, is it okay if we put that on for perhaps, are you suggesting Wednesday or our next regularly scheduled?
it could be next Wednesday.
That's fine.
So what you're gonna do is set the date of the evaluation,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
Save the date.
And then perhaps, Madam Administrator, this could spark a wider discussion on maybe getting that language changed or amended. Okay?
Already made some.
Very good.
All right. And thank you very much for that
Absolutely.
hard work.
Okay, where are we?
We are on
6B.
6B.
All right, so I'm not here yet. 6B, okay. I've been shopping for insurance. This is a little bit of a tough conversation to have, but I've met with, there's nothing in your packets, no. I've
didn't
met
think there
with
was.
a handful of insurance brokers, and I believe that the best value for the town, for a wide variety of reasons, is to cut our ties with Torres Insurance and to go with FB Insure, and here is why. FB Insure takes a very proactive approach to insurance. What they do is they take a look at your policy and they'll look at what you have, and they make sure routinely that your needs are being met, that you're insured accurately, appropriately, you're not overpaying, you're not underpaying, you're not underinsured, your risk is low, and they really provide a service to the town. Again, this is not, there's no added cost. The only cost to the town and then the taxpayers is our insurance premiums, which will go down in theory, and I believe this to be true, as you eliminate more risk. And you eliminate more risk by providing trainings for your employees, providing, and this is the gamut for our highway department, can go to certain trainings about special equipment, safe office places, workplace productivity, workplace professionalism, things like that. And we can prove to our insurance agencies that we're taking a proactive role in mitigating risk. So that's one way that we save money. We also, what I like the most about them is that they will go and take a look at our workers' comp claims and ensure that they are accurate, ensure that the limits set per incident are not too high and not hanging on for too long, because your claims carry with you for 3 to 5 years, so you want to make sure that those are true and accurate. If you have an insurance claim in 1 year, 5 years from then, you're still hanging out with that, with your premium. We have some numbers that I'd like to see down in order to help us with a lower premium. The reason I'm looking to not just shop around for insurance, but to eliminate the ties, because we can get increased competition by severing our broker, getting a new broker, and that person can then go out and shop the whole market of insurance and is not pigeonholed just to different insurance companies other than what we have already. So that would eliminate our competition if we went that way.
So, I apologize if you're not done, but I do just have one question on that. So I work in the insurance industry, so you're absolutely right. You reduce risk. In health insurance, you get a bigger pool, but it's cheaper for everyone because now you have a bigger pool. So in that way, you are right. You do save money in insurance when you reduce risk. Is the implication of what you're saying that our current insurance vendor is not doing these sort of proactive things to save us money? Is that, so I guess what you're saying
That is what I'm saying, yes.
so we would be getting more bang for our buck in that sense,
Except there is no
and
buck.
saving a buck.
There is no buck for that. It just comes with
Okay.
them being our broker. Insurance companies receive commission from the insurance agencies that they do business with. So it's not like we're adding any money.
Yep.
So it's a.
But could be saving money.
We'd be saving.
From
money.
them
Yes.
doing these proactive
Right.
things like checking the workers' comp claims and all that.
Exactly.
Okay. Did, any questions at this point?
Nope.
All right, Madam Administrator, continuing.
Do you have a question?
I was just, if this is approved, somewhere down the road, I would like to see what the savings were.
Oh,
Just
you
so that-
will. You
I
sure
believe
will.
you when you say we're going to save money. I'd just like to know what those savings are
Oh,
down the road.
absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. So later on in the budget process, I'll be there to change those budgets that you've put forward.
So-
Yes, I absolutely will make you apprised of that information.
So do you need a motion now?
I do. I need a couple. Because I've been really active in this, I'm looking to to be designated as the administrator of insurance for the town, which would.
Have we ever had one?
I don't think so. I couldn't
No,
find
I don't
one. I
remember
couldn't
doing
find one. So I would just
Uh-huh.
like that little designation title.
Can we do it thing by
separately.
thing?
Yes.
Okay, so,
So I'm going to make a motion that the town administrator become the designation for as the administrator of our insurance.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Are you adding this to your email signature?
No.
I'm just kidding.
It'll be added to the annual appointments list.
We
though.
have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes. Before we go any further, did you have any questions about anything that was presented? I'm sorry.
No, just to, when you said, had we ever had this position? No. What happened in the past was, at least when I came on in 2007, the person who handled our accounts would get in touch with us and say, I want to make an appointment to come in and review your coverage, and she would come, and she would sit with me, and it was usually the person that would be in Karen's capacity. At the time, it was the secretary, and because she also kept track of all this. So we would go over the whole thing, and she would make recommendations, and if she had questions about vehicles, or is this one still registered, or we would do all of that in one swoop,